So I just watched the 2024 US presidential debate that happened a few days ago, and I wanted to give my thoughts. So I was a political science major. I've watched a good chunk of presidential debates that have happened throughout history. Not every single one. I mean, there's not that many yet because they didn't really start until 1960. So I can kind of look at how this one looks compared to previous ones. I think most political science geeks have seen a few debates, so they kind of know how the candidates measure up. But yeah, this was an exceptional one because, first of all, it occurred before any of the conventions. People are still wondering, why is this thing happening in June? But yeah, in terms of the performances, I don't exactly have a hot take, although maybe it is. I think the moderators won, let's be real. I think Jake Tapper and Dana Bash did a really good job with their questions. They kind of asked questions that highlighted both of the candidates' weaker areas on the issues, like in terms of polling. You know, they asked President Biden about inflation, which is something he's going to need to talk about and assure people that he can get it under control after his second term starts. They asked former President Trump about abortion, about climate change, issues that he really struggles with because, I mean, he's got a history of straight up denying climate change. And yeah, he appointed 3 of the justices who played a role in overturning Roe versus Wade. So I thought Jake Tapper and Dana Bash really did a good job. It probably helped them that they had the mics muted when the other one was speaking, so they didn't have to jump in there and be like, hey, stop yelling at him or anything like that. So it was really chill, I would say. They did a good job. I think in terms of the candidates, you know, a lot of people divide it into 2 areas of like substance versus style. You know, this candidate won stylistically and the other candidate won substantively. Or maybe they say one on both, you know, depending on who you support, because a lot of people just work backwards from their conclusions when they watch a debate. But this is one of those cases where I don't think a lot of people could work backwards from their conclusions with President Biden. I think that a lot of his answers were really incoherent. Unfortunately, he just lost his train of thought a lot. He had one really bad line where he concluded a sentence with, "We finally beat Medicare." And then that gave former President Trump the opportunity to jump in there and say, well, he's right, he did beat Medicare and he's beating it to death. And he accused President Biden of giving Medicare to a bunch of illegals, which is, you know, kind of just a generic talking point for him, ranting about immigration, hitting him on that. So it was a really bad look for Biden. I don't think very few people on the Democratic side seem to be defending it. I don't know if that'll change. Like, you know, maybe in hindsight, you know, like a month from now, there'll be people saying, oh, that debate wasn't so bad. He did fairly well, because he did make a few good substantive points. I think in terms of style, Trump clearly was a winner. I think on substance, his performance left a lot to be desired. He straight up denied the 2020 election, denied that basically Biden was a legitimate president, claimed that every single legal scholar in the world supported overturning Roe versus Wade. And I know that's kind of generic hyperbole, but like, this is a presidential debate. You want to be the president of the United States. Let's tone the hyperbole down. Obviously, there were some legal scholars who supported overturning Roe versus Wade, and he could point to them. But to say that everyone in the world supported doing this is just misleading and nonsensical. He said that he would accept the results of the election if it were a legal, fair election, which I'm pretty sure just means that if he loses, he's going to say it wasn't a fair legal election, that he's going to say there was fraud no matter what if he loses. I mean, he did that in 2020. So that obviously turns off a lot of normies. The majority of Americans do not believe that the 2020 election was stolen, that there was massive voter fraud, that Biden is an illegitimate president, even though the average American might be troubled by his age or his struggles with completing sentences at times. That's not something that's a huge issue. So realistically, former President Trump should have just focused on economics. He should have focused on complaining about inflation, dragging Biden for some of that. Obviously, Biden has a good response to, he could have responded by pointing out that, look, the president doesn't control inflation necessarily. The president doesn't control jobs. The president doesn't just press a button that says, create 10 million jobs. So yeah, both of their performances left a lot to be desired. I feel like Biden's mostly left style to be desired. He basically presented himself very poorly. His voice was hoarse, which him and his campaign blamed on a cold. That's fairly understandable, but struggling to complete sentences so frequently, that can't just be attributed to a cold. Donald Trump, I mean, yeah, his style, unfortunately, it was just on point, and it made Biden look really bad. He had a response to Biden where Biden finished a sentence on border patrol and immigration, and Trump said, I don't really know what he just said at the end of that last sentence there, and honestly, I don't even think he knows either. So it was kind of one of those moments where he channels what the audience is thinking, where they're like, wait, what did he say? And then the candidate, his opponent, points it out, and it's like, it's kind of charming or witty. Obviously, if you don't like him, then it's probably not charming or witty, and you're just like, oh, he's being a prick like usual. But to independents, which are going to be really crucial this election, it unfortunately made a pretty big impact. And then the thing with Biden, too, is like, yeah, the debate didn't go that well, but in previous debates, the incumbent has actually done poorly, specifically on their first presidential debate. So if you remember in 2020, when President Trump was debating his challenger, Joe Biden, a lot of people thought that Biden won that debate. I thought he did, because he kind of just essentially was victimized by Trump's anger, Trump's wrath. They weren't muting the mics when the other one was talking. He was constantly interrupting him, and it was just a horrible look. I saw even Republican and conservative friends talking about how this really wasn't a great look for the president. He riled Biden up to the point that Biden just said, "Will you just shut up, man?" And yeah, it was kind of what a lot of people were thinking, a lot of independents. It turned off a lot of normies. And then in the second debate, Trump did a little bit better, I would say, in 2020. Then if we look in 2012, obviously President Obama won that election quite swimmingly. But in that first debate against Mitt Romney, Obama was kind of out of it. Romney was really charismatic and upbeat. And the general consensus was that he won the debate. There was even some scholar saying that it was Obama's debate was the worst debate of any sitting president they'd ever seen. Obviously now it might just be the second worst. But yeah, it was a bad look for President Obama, but then he made a major comeback in the second and third presidential debates. So the question with Biden is this really a one-off? Because the Democrats are really pressing the panic button. There's talk about, should we replace him with Gavin Newsom, Gretchen Whitmer, Michelle Obama? Another thing too is like, do people have enough of an attention span really to remember that debate? If President Biden has a good debate in September, or like at least an average one, will people still be thinking about this June 27th debate when they're voting in November? Will they still be like, oh, when he said we finally beat Medicare, that was a really bad look, so I'm not going to vote. I'm going to vote Trump. Like, will this happen? I don't know. I mean, I think there's evidence that the average American has a pretty short attention span. There's been a lot of news stories that were really big for a while, and then all of a sudden, everyone just forgets about them. So maybe this debate will be the same way. But you never know. I mean, because it's between presidential candidates, and specifically with an incumbent. And obviously, President Biden's going to be in the public eye as the U.S. president for a while. He'll be giving speeches. He'll be campaigning. Not just campaigning, but serving as president. So people kind of have a continued reminder of who he is. He's not doing what everyone said he was doing in 2020, where it's like campaigning from the basement because of the pandemic. But yeah, we will see. Certainly, it seems like the Democratic Party and the Biden campaign are in damage control mode. And June 27th was probably a really good night to be a Trump supporter or a Republican or someone who just wants to see Biden be defeated in November. Certainly the Democrats, I've seen a lot of people pointing out, why would you run this candidate if you believe that democracy is on the line? That if Trump wins, it's going to be the end of democracy. And that's kind of a fair point, actually. Like, wouldn't you want to run your strongest candidate? Most likely it's because President Biden's the incumbent, and the incumbents usually just cruise to victory in their primary elections. And yeah, he did. RFK as a Democrat, Marianne Williamson was a Democrat, Dean Phillips was a Democrat, Cenk Uygur was a Democrat, and they didn't really stand a chance against President Biden. So yeah, he's their nominee. We will see if that changes at the convention. We'll see if they bring in Gavin Newsom from California. But yeah, it should be really interesting. I mean, I've heard a lot of conspiracy theories too, like, maybe they are running Biden so that they lose to Trump in November. So then Trump will be really bad, and then they'll absolutely clean house in 2028, the Democrats will. I don't know. I mean, it's all just speculation. We might just be in uncharted territory in terms of the president and will they keep going, because we've never had a president get dropped just like that. We've had a vice president go through that before, but not a president. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens. And one thing's for sure, I think we can all hope that in 2028 we get younger presidential candidates who can complete a sentence, and candidates who are not convicted felons. So anyhow, those are just my thoughts. If you like this, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe below. I would really appreciate it. Thank you.